Now, if I do my job correctly with you today, every one of you, and hopefully your friends or relatives, can make themselves heart attack proof. How are you going to make yourself heart attack proof? We're not going to do it with a drug. We're not going to do it with a pill. We're not going to do it with a procedure, stents. We're not going to do it with an operation, bypass. You're going to do it when you change your biochemistry. How are you going to change your biochemistry? With food. What kind of food? Whole food, plant-based nutrition. And if you do this entire sequence of events that I've just gone through with you is going to be eliminated. If you're eating whole food, plant-based nutrition, things do not get sticky, sticky, sticky. You do not have migration of your bad LDL cholesterol into the subendothelial space. You do not have the development of the SWAT team coming in and forming the foam cell. You do not have the foam cell, which tries to thin out your cap over your plaque. You, in turn, are going to strengthen the cap over your plaque. And if you strengthen the cap over your plaque, it cannot rupture. If you cannot rupture your plaque, you have made yourself heart attack proof. How long do you think that takes? 3 weeks. 3 weeks. All right. Pretty exciting stuff. Now, just when you thought I might have been through with the endothelial cells, here we go again. Why? Because up until 1980, we used to think of the endothelial cell as these cute little red bricks that were lining these wonderful pipes of ours. And the interesting thing is that in 1980, that all changed. Why? Because Dr. Furchtgott, working in Brooklyn, was taking the largest blood vessel of a rodent, the aorta, and he would make this sort of spiral staircase, elliptical cut right through this aorta, through the endothelial cells, immersed it in a bath of saline, and it would constrict, vasoconstrict. One day, no cut, no injury to the endothelial cells. Immersed that aorta into saline, it dilated. Did it again, it dilated. Now the race was on, globally. What was the EDRF that Dr. Furchtgott had discovered? Endothelial-derived relaxation factor. Rolls right off your tongue. Thank heavens, that term was with us only 8 years. At the end of that 8 years, Dr. Furchtgott, Dr. Luignaro, and Dr. Murad discovered that the EDRF was a gas, nitric oxide. For that discovery, those three men in 1998 received the Nobel Prize. Now, what makes nitric oxide in all of us so special? One, nitric oxide keeps all those cellular elements in our bloodstream flowing smoothly like Teflon. It keeps things from getting sticky. Number two, nitric oxide is the strongest blood vessel dilator in the body. When you climb stairs, the arteries to your heart, the arteries to your legs, they widen, dilate, nitric oxide. Number three, nitric oxide keeps the wall of the artery from becoming thickened, stiff, or inflamed. Protects you from getting high blood pressure, hypertension. Number four, this is the absolute key. Number four, a normal, plentiful amount of nitric oxide will protect you from ever developing blockages or plaque. So literally everybody on the planet, whether it's in Berlin, London, New York City, Chicago, or Melville, has their cardiovascular disease, because by now, in preceding decades, they have so sufficiently trashed, injured, and compromised their endothelial cells, they aren't making enough nitric oxide to protect themselves. Number 5, nitric oxide can prevent the smooth muscle of the artery wall from migrating into the plaque. And number 6, nitric oxide can destroy the foam cell, Darth Vader. Now that's a pretty remarkable bit of information. And as I look out at this audience right now, I can see some of you saying, gosh, kind of wonder what my level of nitric oxide is. Well, if you go to a doctor's office, it's going to be pretty hard to have that measured, because there is a $30,000 Israeli machine that will do that, but most physicians don't have that. And if you're eating plant-based, you really don't have to have it measured. But from a research standpoint, what is done is you take an ultrasound probe and you place it over the brachial artery at the elbow, and there on the screen will be the diameter of the brachial artery. Then, for 5 minutes, you will encircle your upper arm with a blood pressure cuff, all right? And inflate it above systolic blood pressure, so that for 5 minutes you have absolutely zero blood flow to your forearm and hand. I've done that. It's not exactly habit forming. Then you release the cuff, and immediately with the ultrasound probe, remeasure the new diameter of the brachial artery. And in a normal individual, it'll be 30% greater. So the next great thing that happened was that Dr. Vogel, chairman of cardiology at the University of Maryland, took a group of healthy young subjects to a certain fast food restaurant characterized by arches, which are golden. Half of them got the cornflakes, okay? Brachial artery tourniquet test, normal. The other half got the hash browns and sausage. Within 120 minutes with the brachial artery tourniquet test, those healthy young people couldn't dilate the artery. Now, being young, as they followed them in to the late afternoon, early evening, they began to recover. But think of it, that one meal of hash browns and sausage had so dysfunctionalized their endothelium they couldn't dilate the artery. Just imagine when Americans start eating the hash browns and sausage. We start when we're young, yeah. As a matter of fact, imagine those people after they finish that experiment with Dr. Vogel. The very next morning for breakfast, it's going to be scrambled eggs and bacon. At lunchtime, they'll have white bread with cold cuts and some mayonnaise. Supper time, how about a baked potato with sour cream, vegetables soaked in butter, lamb chops, ranch dressing on the salad, ice cream for dessert. Here in the good old USA, we take those delicate endothelial cells and we just hammer them and smash them and injure them right around the clock, because your body's just beginning to clear up what goes on, what you did, the harm you did in breakfast, and you hammer it again with lunch. You clear that up and hammer it again at supper. And then you'd always have that midnight snack of ice cream, hammer it again until you get to breakfast. So it's no surprise that this is sort of a universal illness in the West. All right. Now, this is just a review for you to recall We've just talked about the various functions it prevents, that is of nitric oxide, prevents stickiness, strongest blood vessel dilator, avoids arterial thickening, prevents blockages, prevents smooth muscle migration into the plaque, and destroys foam cells. Now, today I have time just to share with you one of these absolutely wonderful defense factors that we have within our body. These are absolutely all marvelous components and really deserve another discussion themselves. But what I want you to get from this slide is the fact that absolutely every single one of these natural defense factors is going to be totally optimized when you are consuming whole food, plant-based nutrition. So now it's time to shift gears a little bit, and I want to share with you a couple of studies that I was in, because when you think about it, the key here is, it's one thing to sort of share with you the science, but I think it's important to know about the results. Now, this first study was a small one because when I started back in 1985, I was still actively involved as a surgeon. And I just had to obey or adhere to my surgical responsibilities. So this was a small study. And you might be wondering, how in the world does a general surgeon get involved with nutrition? And I should share with you that in my job as head of the breast cancer task force in the late 1970s, early 80s, I was becoming increasingly disillusioned with the fact that for no matter how many women I was doing breast surgery, I was doing absolutely nothing for the next unsuspecting victim. And that led me to do a bit of global research, and it was quite striking to see countries like Kenya, where breast cancer rates are 30 and 40 times less frequent than the United States. And if you looked at rural Japan in the 1950s, breast cancer was very infrequently identified, and yet as soon as the Japanese women would migrate to the United States, by the second and third generation, still pure Japanese American, they now had the same rate of breast cancer as their Caucasian counterpart. And perhaps even more compelling was cancer of the prostate. In the entire nation of Japan, in 1958, how many autopsy-proven deaths were there from cancer of the prostate? 18. Perhaps the most mind-boggling public health figure I've ever heard. By 1978, as they kind of westernized, they were up to 137, which still pales in comparison to the 28,000 that'll die this year in this country of prostate cancer. So it was about this juncture that I felt I was seeing so many cultures where cardiovascular disease was virtually non-existent. And since it was the leading killer of women and men in Western civilization, I just felt that there would be more bang for the buck if our research was on cardiovascular disease. And the dream was that if we ever get people to eat to save their heart, then they're likely to save themselves from the common Western cancers of breast, prostate, colon, and perhaps pancreatic. So here I was, 1984. I knew I was going to do this study, but I was a cholesterolaholic. I'd grown up on an Aberdeen Angus beef farm and a dairy farm, and I really kind of love these foods. Because let's face it, the Western diet looks delicious. The Western diet smells delicious. The Western diet tastes delicious. And while it is destroying you, it is painless. So I knew I was going to do this study, but as you maybe I recall, Dr. Prochaska from Rhode Island has defined, in those who are going to do a lifestyle change, we go through a number of phases. Pre-contemplation, contemplation, action, maintenance. So I was over here somewhere around contemplation, and I can remember with the month that it happened. It was 1984 in April, and I was attending a surgical meeting with my wife Ann in New Haven, Connecticut. And God, the papers were just boring, and the weather was rotten. But they always have a banquet after these conferences. And at the banquet, this waitress put this plate of roast beef in front of me, and it was just draped over the sides. And I just looked at this and said, this is it. And Ann looked at me and she said, you're not going to eat your roast beef? I said, no. She said, well, then here, I'll have it. Now, Ann's mother had died of breast cancer at age 52. And 2 weeks after that meeting, her sister came down with breast cancer. And then she looked at me and said, I'm with you. So we did it ourselves for a year, and then I was happy with the results that we were seeing. I went in August of 1985 to Bill Sheldon, who was head of the Department of Cardiology, asked the cardiologist if they would be willing to send me 24 patients seriously ill with heart disease, and I'd like to try to encourage them to eat plant-based nutrition. And so over the next year and a half, I got these 24 patients. And as my late brother-in-law used to say, these were Essie's walking dead. They had failed their first or second bypass. They had failed their first or second angioplasty. They were too sick for these procedures, or they had refused. And there were 5 who were told by their expert cardiologist they wouldn't live out the year. But I'm happy to say those 5 all made it beyond 20 years. And we began to suddenly see wonderful things beginning to happen. Not only did their symptoms go away, but when we carefully studied them, they were actually beginning to reverse their disease. Now, a couple of key points here in all of this. I was fearful that the rock upon which this study was most likely to flounder was lack of patient compliance, because I was asking them to make a very, very significant lifestyle change. And therefore, although I was not a trained psychologist, I decided to use for these patients the same mantra that I had been using for my cancer patients, a mantra that I had learned about from a wonderful West Coast surgeon by the name of Bert Dunphy. And Bert Dunphy said that patients with cancer are not afraid to suffer. Patients with cancer are not afraid to die. But patients with cancer are afraid of being abandoned by their family or by their physician. So for the first 5 years, I saw each of these patients every 2 weeks in the office, where I would go over every morsel they ate, check their cholesterol, weight, and blood pressure. At the end of 5 years, I became a little bit more courageous, and I stretched it out to seeing them monthly. Most cardiologists see their patients twice a year. At the end of a decade, they were all pretty well now on autopilot, and I was able to stretch it out to quarterly. And then at 12 years, we reported those original results, which I think, although the study was certainly small, made it the longest study of its type. 12 years is getting close to half a career. So it was exciting to see those results. Now, a couple of rules that I want to share with you that I feel very strongly about is avoiding any drop of any food that has been shown to injure the capacity of the endothelial cell to make nitric oxide. So not a drop of any oil. Olive oil, corn oil, soybean oil, safflower oil, sunflower oil, coconut oil, palm oil, oil in a cracker, Oil in a piece of bread, oil in a salad dressing. Oil injures the endothelial capacity to make nitric oxide. There are numerous well-done, peer-reviewed studies that confirm that. And anything with a mother or a face, meat, fish, fowl, turkey, eggs, and anything that is sugary, Cokes, Pepsis, Diet Colas, cakes, pies, cookies, stevia, agave, excesses of maple syrup, molasses, and honey, and anything that is dairy, milk, cream, butter, cheese, ice cream, and yogurt. I don't like coffee with caffeine. Decaf is okay. Interestingly enough, tea with caffeine, okay. Coffee with caffeine, no. Now, here it is, for those of you who are worrying about this oil. Peer-reviewed scientific study. Olive, soybean, and palm oil intake have a similar acute detrimental effect over the endothelial function in healthy young subjects.